I can't believe how many people are watching these videos.
I can't either.
Thank you.
It's amazing. Yeah. Thank you. And thank you for so many great questions and comments. We're really excited to put some videos together.
We'll do like a Q&A or something next week or the week after and hit a lot of those questions because we got a smart audience. You guys are paying attention.
Yeah.
I love this.
And we want to share what it's like having Sugar on board.
Yeah, absolutely.
She's
a lot of considerations.
Big crew member for us.
Yeah, the most important crew member, actually.
Yeah, she is. Yeah, we thought we'd start with a passage since we were on our way from Eleuthera to the Abacos.
Yeah, you've seen a lot of the boat. You haven't seen the boat sailing much, so we're going to get into that a bit more.
So we'll be going over what we think are the essential elements that go into a successful trip.
Comes down to weather, weather, and weather. We'll make it more interesting than that. It's a little bit more complicated.
But weather is key.
Yeah. So the three elements that we're going to talk about today are...
Picking the right weather window.
Right. Knowing when to go.
Looking at the cuts, the currents, and the tides.
Yep.
And boat performance and sail handling.
You got to know how long it's going to take to get there and what the boat's going to feel like underway, because different boats handle different conditions differently. And catamarans handle the waves way different than monohulls, so you want to stay tuned for that. So we don't want to bore people who aren't interested in the whole thing.
In the notes below, in the description, we put timestamps in so that you can jump ahead to the parts you're interested in. This is a good exercise for us because we've been chilling in the Exumas for a while and we're getting ready for a big trip up to Maine, which will be about a week.
Yeah, we got to dust off the cobwebs a little bit. It's going to be a longer haul to get up to New England.
Yeah.
We live this every day, so we're not exactly sure what we should be talking about, so...
Yeah, keep sending your questions and comments. We really love hearing from you.
Wow, Eleuthera. The time has gone by so quickly. We did meet some really cool people though. We met one really cool guy. He took that Yamaha 15 and I know it needs something really cheap and easy. We just don't have the time to source those parts. So he's gonna take it back to the States and fix it. So yeah, he's gonna get some more good use out of it. Thank you very much, Ben, for doing that. It's time to go. You ready?
I'm so ready. Tomorrow morning.
I wouldn't say this is gonna be a challenging passage, but this will be a good test to get us back into the swing of things for our trip up to Maine, which will probably take several days here in about a month or so. We are roughly here. This is Eleuthera Island. We have been off Spanish Wells, and we're going to go up to Abaco. It can kind of get rough out here. Folks were asking about the process of making a forecast and doing the routing, so got things set up, and I don't know, it might be a good time to take a nap as I lull you to sleep. But for those of you who are interested, we're going to talk weather and routing. We've got a relatively short hop, but it is the open ocean, so we've got to take a bunch of things into consideration. So this is weatheronline.co.uk, and I'm pretty much always monitoring the overall pattern to make sure I see what's coming a long ways off. And if there's a feature that pops up, I'll see how the model handles it over time. So this is the GFS, which you've probably seen on all sorts of different applications, windy or predict wind. It's the global forecasting system. There's a big ridge over the west central Atlantic. And in general, the bigger the surface feature, the slower it moves. So that ridge is pretty big and it's not really moving out of the way. Now notice there's this area of low pressure developing across the northeast with a trailing cold front, a little dip in the isobars that goes all the way down into the Bahamas. That's going to be something that I want to watch out for. After that trough moves through, you can see that the ridge is reestablishing itself. This is a really typical spring-like pattern. As we get out about 10 days to 2 weeks, notice that things get kind of interesting and kind of wonky. That ridge is squished and now we've got an oblong trough and an area of low pressure developing in the central Atlantic. Now I'm not saying this isn't going to happen, but this is fairly unusual to see what looks to be like a tropical storm system developing in the south central Atlantic in April. Anyway, we'll watch how things develop, but really the only thing of note is about 24 hours out. Let's turn our attention to the iPad. First of all, let's just get an idea of how far we're going to have to go. My navigation is somewhat rough at this stage. I'm not plotting waypoints or anything like that. onto the bank there at Great Abaco is 54 miles. And I always tack on a little bit extra, maybe 5 to 8 miles to just account for getting to my route. So let's just call it an even 65 miles. There's two issues you got to be concerned with aside from the weather when you are making a transit like this, and that has to do with the tides. So let's figure out the tides for tomorrow. We've got a little cut that we've got to navigate out here by Little Egg Island. We'll check the tides. We've got a high tide at 6 in the morning, and then we've got a low tide at about 1. And the other end of our journey, check the tides there. The low tide is at 11, and the high tide's about 4:45. So the reason this is important is because when the wind opposes the tide, you can get some really big waves in some of these cuts. Those waves really stand on end. You're definitely going to get pretty salty and tossed around, and nobody wants that at the end of a long day. All right, let's turn our attention to the weather and routing. The weather routing software, this is Predict Wind. And what we're looking at is the wind, the chance for showers, and the sea state. Let's pick a point midway through. You can see the wind speed, 9.1 knots. This afternoon. This is the PWG, and it looks like the wind's filling in a little bit tomorrow, mainly from the southeast. 139 is the wind direction, true, and you can see our course is just about due north. It's maybe 356, 358, something like that. Looks like we have a quartering tailwind, a wind from way aft of our beam. Let's check a couple other models. The PWE. 15 and a half, 16 knots. Looks like about the same wind direction. Again, this is midday on Sunday. We're thinking about leaving tomorrow. And maybe a little stronger according to the GFS and the ECMWF. They're saying about 17 knots. This means we should have a fairly decent little wave pattern setting up, especially in the afternoon. Tomorrow, according to the PWG model, we're talking about a 1.2 meter swell coming in from basically right off our starboard beam. The wave period is 6 seconds, and that's pretty close together. It's going to be kind of a bumpy ride for tomorrow. So in this sort of situation, I'd probably be really hesitant to take off if I didn't have enough wind. Because if you get a choppy sea state like this and not enough wind, the wind rolls right out of your sails, and it's just so nerve-wracking you don't even want to go. So far, this looks fairly decent. Let's check out a couple other models. Yeah, 1.3 meters tomorrow, and all the models are consistent. Now, the ECMWF is drawing that swell in a little bit further from the southeast. That'd be nice. A little quartering sea instead of just from the beam. So let's just, for instance, say I was not totally satisfied with this setup. Maybe I wasn't super happy with taking off in this chop, in this swell. I'd probably look a little bit further out. I would go to the winds and see what was coming our way. It looks like we've got that front coming around, and the winds pick up from the south, and as they normally do, bend her over towards the northwest, northeast, and then the east. And pretty much back into the same scenario by next next Thursday or Friday. So if we wanted to wait 5 days, we could probably get another shot at this. Okay, what about our time en route? These different colored lines are the different routes that the computer is saying are best for us based on those forecasts. And when they're clustered together like this, you know the forecast is in pretty good agreement. And it's not a long trip. It's going to be about 60 miles, and we can easily average 8 knots. In fact, my planning speed is about 7. So let's go to the tables. We have got the average speeds given the different conditions, the different models. Start time of 6 a.m. puts us there at about 1:19 according to the PWG. The PWE is really more or less the same, and the GFS and the ECMWF, again, about the same. looking at 7 hours, 15 minutes or so. Let's go back to the map and let's talk a little bit about rain and convection. We are wondering if we're going to see much for squalls, because with a monohull you reef for the average wind conditions. In a catamaran you reef for the highest gusts. The monohull can spill the wind pretty easy, and especially lighter catamarans, they don't spill the wind, they just tip over. So I don't see anything that's worth being overly concerned with here. Looks like pretty mellow conditions. So it's really easy to look at computer model data and say, well, it's forecasting this, so it's going to be exactly this. This is where some sea miles and some experience and maybe some training comes into play. For the last several days in Eleuthera, the wind has been switching around. It's been south, then it's been east. Every afternoon it's been switching around. So I think that what we're going to encounter offshore is going to be a lot more mixed up than just that easterly swell at 1 to 3, I should say 1.2, 1.3 meters. I think it's probably going to be coming from several different directions, and I also think that the wind speed by the models has been underestimated. So what we need to do is look at what the models have been forecasting and then what's actually happened, and then interpolate that into the next day's forecast. So if I went directly off the models, as they're in pretty good agreement for tomorrow, we'd be talking about a wind from the east-southeast at maybe 12 to somewhere around 17 knots. I think we're probably going to be getting closer up to 20, maybe even a little bit over that. The computer models are saying we're going to see an easterly swell at 1.2 to 1.3 meters, so about 4, maybe 5 feet. And I think we should see something somewhat over that. Maybe 5 to 6 feet, maybe building from the southeast as we get through the afternoon. Those strong winds come up. And then also, we saw some pretty decent northeast swells when we were checking out the northern cut this morning. That may factor in as well. I bet tomorrow we're going to see some stronger or larger northeast swells. And I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some 7 or 8 footers. So let's see how tomorrow turns out. Gotta get going early so we can get to the cut on the other side at the right tide. Alright, it is 5:12 and we are underway. Now normally it wouldn't be a very good idea to come and go from a cut or something like that in the dark, but we've got the tracks that we laid down before, and this is not that technical of a cut. It's pretty wide, it's more like a channel. I think we're gonna get to that cut maybe 45 minutes before dawn, so there may actually be a little bit of light. We're going to about here, 58.6 miles, so I'll say go to cursor. No autopilot, I don't want you to steer, I want to steer myself. And I don't know if you can see that, but it now gives us an ETA. That is 2:30 to 3 o'clock at this current speed of 7.3 knots. So I'm moving the Traveler down, and you got the sheet, and then you've got the Traveler for the main. And when you adjust the Traveler down, you control the top of the sail. You control how much twist is in it. That, my friend, looks like a squall out there.
You gonna get us?
Looks like it could. That's the benefit to having daylight. You can see the squalls coming a little easier. Here come the swells.
Here come the swells.
Doo-doo-doo-doo. Here come the swells.
I see.
It's alright. I'm making good time here. Seas are confused. And this kind of wind speed is actually, it's nice when the seas are confused. Right now it's blowing about 20, 21 knots true wind speed. And it's nice to have some wind to keep the sails filled, because if the winds are too light, these waves and swells will roll the wind out, and then the sails start flapping and banging, and that sucks. As expected, the seas are a bit confused. We've got a swell coming in from the northeast. It's about 6, 7, maybe an 8 footer every once in a while. And then with this wind off our starboard quarter, we've got a bit of chop, so it's all kind of swirling around and a little confused, but making good time. The ride's not bad. How you doing? How you feeling?
I'm feeling really good. I think all that rocking in the last few days helped me acclimate to this because I feel good. And I'm excited for the Abacos.
Yeah, new territory.
Yeah, Sugar's doing good. She's all passed out and got some coffee. I'm not hungry. It's all good.
Yesterday I was talking about clouds, and when you see clouds in a line or a line of convective clouds, usually means something's going on. And I'll give you my take, give you my forecast, my prediction. What I think this is going to be is I think it's going to be a slight wind shift. I think the wind's going to come around to the east a little bit more and probably increase just a bit. It looks like that cloud line is actually filling in a bit, so maybe I was right here. If these clouds continue to build, I will call Megan up and we will take a reef in anticipation of some increased wind. Already up to 17. So we'll head up and bring in the main a bit, and then I'll reef it.
Job.
All right. So when do you reef?
Early.
When you first think about it. All right, is the autopilot's on standby? So bear away. Put a reef in the main. It's pretty easy to reef the jib. Just roll that thing in a couple times. But yeah, our little line of clouds filled in, and so did the wind. Check it out.
There's so much seaweed out there.
Just going through some Sargasso weed. That's always fun. Probably get some on the prop. Have to clear that after we come in. And it's also going to get all over our fishing line that's out. Yay! You see the Sargasso weed clumped together like this, often it's a current line, or a line where the currents are changing and stuff is just kind of gathering around. But also fish tend to like this area too. Hopefully we'll get something. Alright, I think I know what's going on here with this line of clouds. Now, when a line of clouds is advancing in one direction, it's usually indicative that there's an air mass behind it that's pushing it along, and you'll usually get really strong outflow winds out ahead of that line. But this line is different. The showers are moving along the same direction as the line. So the line is oriented northwest, southeast, and the showers within that line are moving from southeast to northwest. So I think this is a little convergence zone. It's where the winds on one side are pushing up against the winds from the other side by just maybe only a few degrees, maybe only 15 or 20 degrees, but I think that's what's going on here. You typically don't have really strong outflow winds from these, but you can expect a wind shift. I'd say we're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
The waves are kind of evened out. Still decent sized sea.
Yeah.
But the wind's been picking up and we're flying. We're gonna get there ahead of schedule.
It's nice out. Lots of flying fish. Got the fishing line out.
Monohull sailors are always curious about how fast we go. Well, typically my answer is on a reach of some sort, like a close reach, beam reach, or broad reach. We're doing about 60 to 70% of the wind speed. In winds less than about 10 knots, on a reach of some sort, no, in a 7 or 8 knot wind, we can do 5 knots, no problem. The reason for that is the boat's moving through the water and moving through the air, so it's creating its own apparent wind. So yeah, even in light winds, this boat can move pretty good. If we've got a 10 knot breeze, we can go anywhere between 6 and 7.5 knots, maybe even 7.7, something like that. Once we get up to about 15, 16 knots, we're getting close to that 60%. So at 16 knots of wind, we're pretty easily doing 8 in most conditions. In 20 knots of wind, which we're inching up on now, we're going to typically be at the 9 to 10 knot range. Now, sea state has a big impact on how fast we end up going in reality, because you put in a mixed up sea like we've got today and it definitely slows the boat down. Any sort of head chop, you know, if the wind is forward of the beam when we've got a pretty decent chop coming in, that'll really slow us down. But yeah, about 60 to 70% of the wind speed up to a whole speed of about 11 or 12 knots. At 11 or 12 knots, I think we're kind of maxing out. The boat gets really, really noisy. It's a little bit harder to control. It's not quite surfing at that speed, but it's definitely a handful. So oftentimes what we'll find is that we are trying to slow the boat down, not trying to make it go faster. Once we're off the wind, downwind, dead downwind, we're not too much different than a monohull, maybe a little bit faster than a monohull of the same length for any given wind speed. But we're not rolling around, so that's really, really nice. And then our speeds on a close reach, you got to start talking about VMG, or velocity made good. These cruising cats with the fixed keels without the dagger boards, you can point as high as, 40 degrees apparent, but the boat starts making a ton of leeway. It's basically sliding sideways. We can get as close to the wind as about 55 before we start losing our bite. The keels start losing their bite in the water. 50 to 55 degrees, close as we can pinch up. And it really depends on sea state, how fast we can go. In a 15 knot wind, we'll go upwind at 8, 9 knots, no problem. You throw in a bit of a chop and the bows start popping up and down, we'll go down to 6.5 or 7 pretty quick. Got one more addition on the performance numbers, and that is with the spinnaker. The cool thing about the asymmetrical spinnaker is you can sail really, really deep with it. 140 degrees apparent, no problem. And it's fast with light winds. So with a true wind speed of like 12.5 knots, you can easily do 8.5 or 9 knots on this boat. Like with the other sails, you max out probably about 11.5 or 12 knots, then things get a little bit spooky. But it doesn't take a whole lot of wind. It doesn't take a whole lot of wind to get you up to that speed when you get the cruising spinnaker. So yeah, great light wind sail, and yeah, it can fly pretty tight as well. We made really good time. As usual, we are ahead of schedule. Just looking at this ocean, there's no way you'd be able to get in through that cut if the tide was going out. It would be a rage. We got winds from the southeast at about 20, 22 knots. And there's a lot of 6, 7, and even 8 footers rolling through here, so that would be dangerous with an outgoing tide.
Sugar has been really good. She didn't have to go to the bathroom at all, which is good because these seas are a little rough for her. And she's getting really wobbly. So she's down there, hunkered down, holding it in. We're going into the cut. Nick's gonna jibe us. Hello. Woo. Okay, I gotta go get the fishing line. Home stretch.
Taking this off.
Woohoo! All right, we are just coming into Leonard Bay, Leonard Key. We're just gonna look around for a good spot to drop the hook.
We're here. Well done, team. Yay! Well, not exactly an epic voyage, but tested our skills, right?
Yeah.
How did you feel?
Good.
I felt fine. Mixed up seas, pretty decent sized seas. We reefed, we shook out a reef, we jibed. What else did we do? Navigated, got weather, timed the cuts right. That's about all there is to it. The rest is just making crackers and cheese.
You hear the sound. And Nick is busy responding to all of your comments.
I'm really enjoying it, actually. I love answering these questions because they're so they're just good questions. Like, they're thoughtful, like paying attention. Like, Bill here is asking about what exactly a tight temperature gradient is in development of a thunderstorm. Like, what do I mean by what's a tight gradient? So that's thinking.
That's a good question.
And it makes me think. So that's so that's challenging me, and that's good. So
Nice.
being able to explain things is it makes you better understand it yourself. Or you have to understand it better yourself in order to explain it to somebody else. See, even explaining it to somebody
I totally
else.
agree. That's what I love about it. This
So-
whole process.
That's what's kind of cool about sharing our knowledge is like we kind of have to like step it up ourselves to be able to convey what the proper thing is or convey
Yeah.
our wisdom.
Nice.
I'm a little tired.
You need some coffee.
Yeah, I do.
We're having some more coffee. We're having a sparkling drink and some cheese and crackers.